And we continue our 1 hour Newsmaker show today. In the last segment, it was Steuben County Democratic Chairman Sean Hogan. And now here in segment 2, this segment, it'll be Republican Assemblyman Phil Palmesano to come on and talk about the Republican candidates. Assemblyman Palmesano, thanks for joining us live this morning.
Good to be with you again, Brian.
Assemblyman Palmesano, let's start out with the Assembly race. Your thoughts on Marjorie Burns and the Barbara Bear race there for the 133rd Assembly District?
Well, I certainly think we'd like to see Marjorie get elected because we don't need to have another member of the Assembly Democratic majority that basically kowtows to New York City and what New York City wants to do when it comes to policy. At least, Marjorie knows upstate it would be a part of our conference and fighting for upstate, whereas, the other candidate is going to be in a majority that's dominated by New York City Assembly Democrats that want to have an agenda that speaks to their issues like single-payer health care or taxpayer-funded campaigns. That's not something we need in New York State, but that's an agenda the Assembly Democratic majority will push.
And so you're supporting Marjorie Burns there, Assemblyman Palmesano. In the state Senate, there's the Senator Tom OMara, Amanda Kerskisner race.
Yes, Senator Tom OMara is a good friend of mine, and we've worked closely over the years together. Listen, Tom, there's no harder worker person in Albany than Tom OMara. He's very instrumental in a lot of the successes we've had in the region, whether it's, you talk about St. James Hospital, whatever, the continued advocacy for Alstom and the contract there. He's been, what he's done for the fire department and what he's done for the community and what he's done for the taxpayers. He's a constant advocate, and he knows this district. He's worked hard. He's looking out for the taxpayer. His opponent is an outright advocate for a single-payer health care system in New York State, which would be devastating. I can't emphasize this enough because I know this is something the Senate Democrats are trying to push for their agenda. Governor Cuomo's even talked about this. It would be up $156 billion more in taxes. It would take away people's Medicare and veterans' health care benefits and consolidate that into a program that would be run by New York State, which would be devastating. So you want to say something to your mother or grandparents on Medicare that you're not going to have Medicare any longer. It would also, I think, cripple our financial industry in the state because of the capital gains taxes they want to put on the industry, the amount of taxes that would drive up. Nothing is keeping the stock market and the financial industry here in New York. That's something that would certainly drive people away. And again, the taxpayer-funded campaign is, again, something she's been supportive of. We don't need to spend $200 million a year to fund people's campaign who are running for office. Even if you disagree with them, you shouldn't have your taxpayer dollars to go have to fund their campaigns. That shouldn't be a priority for the state. $200 million would be better spent to help fix our local infrastructure, our roads and bridges. It'd be better spent to help our schools or our libraries, or better yet, give that money back to the taxpayer, not use it to fund campaigns of politicians who you might have a strong disagreement with on their policies. And also, even the other issues that's come up a lot, both in the congressional race and the Senate, race. These push by some members of the Democratic Party that want to have open heroin injection sites to put the stamp of approval for government-backed heroin injection sites. Can you understand that? That just is, I think, way out of touch and way out of focus and where our priorities should be. Those are misplaced priorities. That's bad policy. We have a heroin and opioid problem, so we're going to have a heroin injection sites. That's just terrible. And those are just policies that are out of touch with, I think, the values and principles of this district and state.
Talking live with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. You raised that the Mitrano Reed, that's been a big issue in that campaign, the congressional race for the Congressman Tom Reed seat in the 23rd Congressional District in New York State. Tracy Mitrano was Democrat opponent. Did you happen to catch the debate the other night on WETM or any of the debates, Assemblyman Palmesano?
I missed, unfortunately, the debate with Mr. Reed and his opponent, but listen, I've followed the race closely. Not only does Tom Reed's opponent, Tracy Mitrano, support open heroin injection sites, she supports a government-run health care system that's going to be a tab of about $32 trillion. That's something our country cannot afford, our state cannot afford. When it comes to Second Amendment rights, she says she's for Second Amendment rights, but she had out there policies on having a gun registry and liability, unlimited liability for gun dealers and gun owners. I mean, this is just policies that's way out of touch with, I think, mainstream thinking in our region, in this district. Maybe not for Ithaca, but for the rest of the district. I mean, I think the rest of the district is a supporter of Second Amendment rights. Her policies are certainly or would be more in line to kind of obstruct people from owning a firearm. But in the $32 trillion healthcare plan, my goodness, jobs. When we talk about jobs, I mean, she made comments that manufacturing jobs are 18th and 19th century. We need manufacturing jobs. We have manufacturing jobs in Hornell with Alstom. Dresser Rand in Wellsville, which is looking at losing some of those jobs, and she said she didn't know much about what they even did there. And those are jobs manufacturing jobs that we want to keep in this state. Manufacturing is like the hub of our state in this region. Those are good-paying jobs that keep people here in these communities, help them raise a family. To say they're 18th and 19th century jobs, it just shows, I think, being out of touch with the region and the district she's trying to represent.
Talking live with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. And Assemblyman Palmesano, how do you getting back to the state Senate, but will the Republicans be able to hold on to the Senate? I wanted to ask you that question.
Brian, I certainly hope so. The Senate Republicans have been a checks and balance, have been a kind of like a firewall for some of these crazy liberal, progressive policies, whatever you want to call it. For example, I mentioned single-payer health care in New York. If the Democrats get control of the state Senate, that's one of the issues they're going to be pushing. They're campaigning on it. Again, I can't emphasize. Right now, we collect $77 billion a year in taxes. This plan would have to increase taxes another $156+ billion a year. Again, for your mother or grandfather or grandparent on Medicare, they would no longer have Medicare. For our veterans out there, veterans health care, you would no longer have veterans health care. What they would do is they would take all that and roll it up and put that money into the state and then let the state dictate and manage your health care. I don't think that's appropriate. I think our senior citizens, our veterans, have earned their Medicare and veterans health care. We shouldn't be messing with that. And again, the amount of tax revenue that would create, and we have 1 million uninsured people in New York State. Instead of focusing on trying to help those people, we're going to go out there and disrupt health insurance for the rest of New Yorkers. We could help people who are uninsured with policies, but to create a single-payer plan in New York State, which will devastate our economy, devastate job creators and small businesses and manufacturers, and potentially, I think, lead to the elimination of the stock market being housed in New York State and the financial industry, because they don't have to be in New York State. With technology and all that today, they can be anywhere. They can be in Texas. They can be in New Jersey. They don't have to be in New York. And something like that would be a red flag for that industry, and we could lose that, and we lose all that revenue that comes with it, because the stock market produces about 15 to 20% of our state revenue on an annual basis. If we lose that, then what are we going to do? And again, another proposal the state senate are pushing is taxpayer-funded campaigns to the tune of $200 million a year. That's a misplaced priority. That $200 million would be better spent, like I said, on fixing our roads and our bridges, putting that money into education, or better yet, here's a novel idea. Let's give that money back to the taxpayer. Those are the things the Senate Democrats are pushing, and God forbid we lose the Senate Democrats, the state Senate to the Senate Democrats. And if Governor Cuomo is reelected, then you're going to have all three houses Democrated by New York City, and then you're going to have those liberal progressive policies that are not in line with all what we're trying to do here in upstate New York, and it'll be all focused on New York City. So it's definitely a serious issue that we need to be care about when we go to the polls. So if you don't have family members down in other areas, make sure they're telling please tell your family and friends to please vote for the Senate Republican candidate, because we need that checks and balances in our government.
Talking to Assemblyman Phil Palmesano on our 1-hour Newsmaker show today. Governor Andrew Cuomo, Mark Molinaro, that race, Assemblyman, big story in the Times-Union today. And the Albany Times-Union reports that Mark Molinaro has come out as a candidate who, as a Republican candidate, and this is unusual. He says he supports codifying Roe v. Wade, protecting Roe v. Wade for New York State to protect women in case abortion is made illegal by the Supreme Court in Washington. What do you think that'll do for Molinaro's chances, Assemblyman?
I haven't seen that article, Brian, so I haven't seen that statement. I think the difference is one of the things you hear about, and with the proposals they've had in Albany, the proposal that Governor Cuomo has supported, the proposal that's been in our House, isn't simply about codifying Roe v. Wade, because, I mean, that's the law in the land here anyway, but what they want to do with the proposals they put forward is expanding abortion in New York State. I haven't heard Mark Molinaro say anything of that nature. They're talking about expand these proposals that Governor Cuomo has supported. The bill that passed the Assembly in our House, which I oppose, would expand abortion in New York State, because and quite frankly, under the current law in the federal land, the bill they did just says it wants to codify Roe v. Wade, but it doesn't take into consideration the other legislation and other Supreme Court decisions, like Casey versus Planned Parenthood in 1992. That decision by the U.S. Supreme Court basically acknowledged that states have a right to provide some restrictions, and that there is at some points there's an interest in the baby or the fetus, however some people want to describe it, and you can look to reject. You could stop late-term abortions. I mean, the bill that Governor Cuomo supports that we've rejected. A lot of people have rejected and are opposed to the bill that many are pushing would expand abortion rights so there could be unlimited abortions under any reason, even in the late-term months, for any reason. Again, I haven't seen the article. I don't know much about it, but I doubt it would be going to the extent of talking about expanding abortion rights in New York State. So that's something I want to see more of. But I think, talking about that, he's not calling for. I know one thing I know for sure. He is not calling for the expansion of abortion rights in New York State, which is the legislation that Governor Cuomo and the Senate Democrats and the Assembly Democrats want to push forward. And I think that's wrong. That's a misplaced priority. That's just not the right thing to do. That's just wrong, period. To expand abortion's here, we understand that, but to expand it so you can have late-term abortions for any reason whatsoever, that's what that legislation that came before us would do. And it wouldn't take into account the other U.S. Supreme Court decision, like I said, Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which acknowledges that there are the rights for states to provide some restrictions and checks on this issue. And this legislation that the Governor Cuomo and the Senate Democrats and Assembly Democrats want to push would expand abortion in New York State. We don't need to expand. There's no lack of abortions in New York State. We don't need to expand the opportunity for even more abortions in the late months of pregnancy for any reason, just because you don't feel good or whatever it may be. That's what they're pushing for. That's unfortunate. That's why I'm adamantly opposed to it, and will continue to be adamantly opposed to it. I'm pro-life. I'm proud to be pro-life, and will continue to be pro-life. This legislation that they're pushing will be an expansion, not just a codification. It will be a flat-out expansion, so you'll have more abortions in New York State. We should be looking to reduce the number of abortions in New York State, not looking to have more of them.
Going to take a quick break, talking to Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Stay with us.
It's football time. Think Little Italy of Hornell when you're placing your football order. Pizza, wings, calzones, subs, strombolis, garlic knots, and more. Every Sunday, Little Italy has football specials. And speaking of specials, did you know every Monday night at Little Italy, you can get a large cheese pizza for only $8 from 4 until 10 p.m. Call Little Italy at 607-324-6740 or check out their Facebook page for more information.
Soggy weather in the forecast for the next couple of days for the southern tier. Periods of rain today with a high somewhere between 45 and 50 later this afternoon. It's going to continue to rain tonight. It may rain hard at times. Lows will be 40 to 45. For tomorrow, we'll have scattered showers during the day. We're going to be about 50 to 55. Showers will continue tomorrow night. Lows 35 to 40. Lots of clouds Saturday. Chance for showers. High Saturday afternoon only around 45. I'm meteorologist Rob Carolyn.
And we're speaking live this morning with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. And Assemblyman wanted to get to your thoughts on the Assembly. We talked about the state Senate in the last segment, and your thoughts on the Republicans holding on to that. I'm guessing, realistically speaking, there's no chance of the Republicans taking the state assembly, largely because of the way it's districted. I know that, and I've said this before, former state senator George Winter said the assembly got that district map worked out years ago so that it would stay Democrat, and of course New York is a Democrat state. But will there be any changes in the Assembly come January when people are sworn in to the State Assembly in Albany?
I think we have a good chance in the Assembly to take back more seats in the Assembly because, from our perspective, we a good number to get to. If we can get up to 51, that allows us to be part of a veto-proof, help help sustain a veto. So if Mark Molinaro wants to veto a bill that the Democrats are pushing forward that's bad for New York, if they try to override the veto, you need 2/3 of a House. We could be in the Assembly to help sustain that veto. And listen, I think we're going to pick up some seats in the Assembly. I'm quite sure we can. We're working hard at that, so that's a good thing. But that's why hopefully we can talk a little bit more about the governor's race because I love this because I think Mark Molinaro's got a plan that can help everyday New Yorkers. I mean, I think Mark Molinaro can relate to the average person. I mean, here's a guy who grew up on food stamps. He had a single mom and a stepdad, and really overcame. Governor Cuomo was born to privilege. He doesn't relate to the everyday New Yorker. Andrew Cuomo has been surrounded by corruption. I kind of refer to the 4 gates. Corruption gate. 8 people around him have been put in jail. Joe Percoco, who we refer to as brother, the Calieros and Todd Howe with the Buffalo Billion, the investigation going on right now, the Crystal Run Healthcare, where executives were given bonuses and then $400,000 were put into the campaign. None of that's been returned. The Pardon Gate, where Governor Cuomo went out and pardoned was somewhere 24,000 plus murderers, rapists, sex offenders, just to allow them the opportunity to vote. That's misplaced priorities. The bridge gate, rushing to try to get the bridge opened downstate, the former Tappan Zee Bridge and now the Mario Cuomo Bridge, to get that open before the primary, before Cynthia Nixon. And the other one I like to refer to is government gate. Governor Cuomo made a comment and said, "I am the government." That's just a lot of arrogance, in my opinion. You're not the government. The people are the government. And Mark Molinaro understands that we're there to serve the people. And we have a chance to take back this government on Election Day with Mark Molinaro, who has a plan, one, to deal with the Albany accountability and the corruption. He wants to put in term limits. People are there too long. Let's put in term limits. He has oversight for the comptroller on these economic development projects, something the governor has fought and pushed back on, didn't want to have happen. He thinks there's enough oversight. Let's give the comptroller oversight over this process and a database of deals so the public can see how all these dollars are being funded. So I think Mark Molinaro has a plan on that. His plan to reduce property tax is 30%. We're addressing the Medicaid burden that's on our property taxpayers. That's something that can be done, something that should be done. If something can be phased in, it's realistic that it can be done. Governor Cuomo has said, no, we're not going to do that. We can't do that. Well, Mark Molinaro doesn't say we can't. He says we're going to do it. And I just think these other issues, like I mentioned to you before, Brian, that if Governor Cuomo's also expressed some interest in doing the single-payer system, he's kind of left open the door for that with his debate with Cynthia Nixon and other things he's talking about. And single-payer in New York would be absolutely devastating. Taxpayer-funded campaigns, $200 million a year. We don't need that. That is not something that should be a priority of our state leaders. And I think Mark Molinaro, I've known him a long time. He's a friend. He's worked real hard. He came up and struggled, but he's overcome. And we have a chance to elect someone with a good moral compass and to help take back our government on Election Day. And we have a big rally for Mark on tomorrow at 3 p.m. in Corning. We invite everyone to come down and listen to Mark. It's down at Sullivan Kitchen and Bath, the center, on 400 Park Avenue at 3 p.m. Come listen to Mark, hear what he has to say, because Mark has a great background, great experience, and I think he can lead the state, get away from these corruption charges that keep plaguing our state government. I mean, to put a stain on our institution, and it basically paints us all with one broad brush when you see these corruption trials and these pay-to-play policies. People, the amount of the $750 Buffalo $1 billion, and now under with the corruption cases there, the convictions there, all that was part of Governor Cuomo's baby, the Buffalo Billion, and it's stained with this over the top of it. And these other things like the Joe Percoco, who was working out of the professional out of the legislative office, the government office, raising money and doing different things, and Andrew Cuomo had no idea what Joe Percoco was doing, the guy he referred to as his brother. I mean, there's a big cloud of smoke around this administration, and the convictions show that we have a chance on Election Day to take back our state government. And with Mark Molinaro leading our ticket, and our Attorney General candidate Keith Wofford, who will be an independent, his opponent Tish James was handpicked by Governor Cuomo, handpicked to be the candidate, and was funded through the campaign through his help. You think she's going to be looking out and going after if Andrew Cuomo's the governor to be independent and go after him if he's doing anything wrong? I don't think so.
Down to 30 seconds, Assemblyman.
Thanks, Brian. And Keith Wofford would be a great Attorney General to go with Mark Molinaro, and certainly Jonathan Trichter, who has the financial experience, understands the markets, understands what we need to do, and how he can use the Office of the Comptroller to improve New York State and to protect the taxpayers. I think we have a great ticket, the Republican ticket. I know a lot of people don't want to give us the time and the energy because they think the demographics, but we can win, ladies and gentlemen. We can win this race. You just have to get out and vote. Tell your family and friends to get out and vote. Knock on doors, make phone calls.
Assemblyman, we do have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. Always great to be with you. Have a great day.
You too, and apologies for cutting you off. We have network obligations. It's AM 1480, Wlea Hornell.